I would say it's more the internal world than the external. I think it went the opposite way for a long time, where it was, okay, you achieve success and you make money and you support the family and you provide for the family, blah, 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 blah. And just don't worry about your feelings. Don't even worry about them. Don't talk about them. Don't think about them. Don't you dare cry.
When I am a father, that's my intention. I think leading by example through my own virtue and effort is going to create a high bar that creates adversity. I think.
Next Level Nation, welcome back to another episode of Next Level University, where we help you level up your life, your love, your health, and your wealth. Today, for episode number 1805, what does it take to be a real man? I texted Alan and said, hey man, what do you think about doing this episode? From the NLU perspective, not the toxic, insecure stuff that you hear very often.
I think we should do it from the frame. Here's what I think we should do.
What do you think we should do?
I think we should do it from the frame of, we went to high school together, and I think that insecure men in high school, I would say both of us were at that time.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
I think that what we thought back then was a quote-unquote real man versus what we now understand. I think that would be really powerful.
Somebody asked me on a podcast recently, they said, what is it? What did they ask me? I was talking about my dad and how I didn't have a dad around, and they asked, are you going to have kids? And I said, no. We're not going to have our own kids. We're not going to have our own kids. We've already decided that. And he's like, well, you never know. You might change your mind. I said, well, if so, I'd have to get the surgery reversed. Like, that's how committed I am to not having our own kids. I got stuff taken care of because that was kind of the decision we made. And he said, well, what do you think the point of, or the goal of being a good man is, or a good dad? And I said, as hyper-consciously as possible, not passing on the traumas and triggers that you had, but also not doing the opposite and giving somebody the opposite of, okay, I grew up with no money, I'm going to make sure you are showered with everything, and then you have some level of entitlement. Yeah. I said, I think that's the goal. The goal is to be so self-aware that you understand why you are the way you are based on the way you were raised, and then make sure you don't overswing and create the opposite problems for the next generation.
I think, and again, I'm not a parent yet, but I've been thinking a lot about this because I've always wanted to be a good father, not having a father, and then having what I would consider not a good father for a stepfather. I was on a podcast yesterday, and he said, why didn't you change your last name back? I was like, how dare you? I was joking. But he's like, I would have changed my name. I don't really care what you would have done, son. But I had that little moment of, I chose not to change it back because it's part of my story.
Yeah.
You know, it's part of my story. I don't identify with McCorkle because I wasn't a McCorkle. I mean, I am by blood, but not by nurture, right? So I'm the first Irish, German, Polish Lazarus.
We have to change everything. Lazarus,
man.
88,
Right?
A McCorkle, 88. A lot of work.
It's a lot of work.
I don't even know how to spell
honestly,
it.
I think to myself, that is part of my story. And when I was 7, my mom gave me that choice. She said, do you want to change your name? Now, whether or not it was a real choice, I don't really know, to be honest. I mean, I was like, yeah, let's do it. But I remember thinking to myself, he's like, well, that's just my perspective. I was like, well.
Easy for you to
usually,
say.
Yeah,
Friend.
not usually a place you go in an interview. I don't think he meant any harm by it. I think he's an engineer and he doesn't understand social norms. It's okay. That's not usually a question you ask publicly, sir. But anyway, so what was my point of all that? Okay, so I wanted to be a really good dad. And I always thought to myself, and this is fascinating, and I guess, I hope it is, I figured it would be, legacy is my number one core value, and it's like your own legacy. I don't have a long line of, I don't have like my dad's dads. I don't have any of that. You and I kind of grew up without families. A little bit, not with the conventional family.
Yeah,
not with the conventional family because we didn't have dads. And I think typical families, not always, but in the past, families were usually more patriarchal. And I'm not saying that's right, by the way, definitely not. But I think that you and I growing up without dads, I wanted to be a really good dad. And so the 3 sort of things that I've articulated in my own mind, and I've been thinking about this my entire life, honestly, is what is the right amount of, how do you lead because I think parenting is leadership of little people. How do you lead effectively? Because on the one hand, you don't want them to have no adversity, because our adversities have made us stronger.
Yeah.
And smarter and more innovative and more creative and also more grateful and less entitled, to your point. But you also don't want to induce trauma or adversity. And so you don't want to overswing, to your point. So I was thinking to myself, there's two types of adversity. There's the adversity that happens to you, that you and I kind of had a lot of, me more than you, but we had a lot. Like, we didn't get to decide that we didn't have dads. That wasn't a choice. That was just adversity, right? So my father died, that's just adversity. Your father left, that's just adversity. It happens to you. What I think is, and again, I'm saying this with humility because I know I'm not a parent yet, but what I think is a good type of adversity is the one that comes from setting high aims. So you and I set big goals together when we were naive and we were in our mid-20s, and we had our quarter-life crises, and we decided, you know what, we're done with this corporate thing, and we're going to build our own business. And we aimed high, and you had a net worth goal, and I had a net worth goal, and we're going to, embark on this journey. We're going to change the world. And we were naive kids, really, in hindsight. Yeah. And a lot of that is going to still happen, and a lot of that is going to be very different than we originally thought, I think. But here's the thing. All of the adversity that came from setting that high aim together has made us better men, I think.
I would agree.
We've had to face everything, inside, outside. We've had to, not everything, obviously, we're still on that journey, but we've had to go on this hero's journey to discover who Alan and who Kevin is, to reassess our past, to build ourselves in the present, and to become better and give up the previous level in order to get to the next level. And so I think that parenting, when I am a father, that's my intention, I think leading by example through my own virtue and effort is going to create a high bar that creates adversity, I think. In other words, having a father to live up to, which I never had, might be something that I can create for my children, where, not in the ego sense of my kids need to, make sure they make me proud, like, not that kind of thing. Because I think a lot of parents do that too. It's, well, you need to be XYZ in order to make me proud.
Yeah.
And that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, and I really do wish that this happened more often, not only in my own life, but in general, where parents chase their own dreams and achieve their own goals and improve themselves, to where it inspired kids to want to do the same. And I think that that's ultimately, again, that's my take.
It's what I think now more than ever. So a week ago, Tara and I were getting ready for bed. We were watching something in bed, and it was like 9 o'clock. We usually go to bed at 10. And she said, do you want to do a face mask? It was on my birthday. This was actually on my birthday. She said, do you want to do a face mask? One of those Neutrogena face masks. And I was like, hell yeah, I do. I love them. They're awesome. And I don't know. I think she took a picture of me like putting it on because it was mayhem and I was leaking all over the place. And I remember thinking, it would not bother me at all if she posted that on social media.
Yeah.
It wouldn't bother me even a little bit. It would have bothered 16-year-old or 20-year-old or 25-year-old Kev. 25-year-old Kev a lot.
So let's go into why. That's exactly it.
Because I believe the old definition of a man was externally hard. You are supposed to be externally hard, and you're not supposed to show any emotion. I now think, for me, this is my perspective, and my perspective only. I think being a real man is being as internally strong as you are externally strong. And you show emotion, and you show vulnerability, but it's in a constructive way with the intention of you improving. Maybe it's, and again, everybody has their own definition. It's, I will get knocked down, for sure, and I will be vulnerable, and I will cry, and I will ask for support, and I'll need a shoulder, but the next day, or 2 days, or 3 days, or 4 days, or 5 days later, I will get up and I will try to do better. And I will take ownership for my mistakes, which I make a ton of, and I'll work on the internal stuff that is just the ownership of the internal stuff and the external stuff. I don't think you need to dress a certain way. I don't think you need to say certain words. I don't think you have to have a certain career. I think it's just being a real man is being a real human who is focused on growth, who is focused on humility. Somebody asked me on a podcast, they said, what is something that you see that is considered very positive, but you think is dangerous behind the scenes?
Nice.
And I said, woo. I said,
it's a good question.
It's a great question. I don't remember who it was, but it was a really good question. I said men, and we were speaking on men, humans in general, but men who have a very, very rough exterior that you can tell is just mostly ego, who are unfortunately being role models for other men.
Yeah.
Because it's misconstrued as confidence, and it's not. It's not confidence, because you can tell. You can tell by the way they react to certain things. That's not confidence.
How can you tell? That's the point. Because in high school, and for me, what was the most insecure year of your life? Mine was 14. Stepdad left. Mom got in a fight with her sister, lost that side of kind of got ostracized from that side of the family. We went from, upper middle class. We had a yacht as a family to I get free lunch at school now.
Yeah.
Because our income is so low. And my sister moved out that same year. So for me, and I was prepubescent. I mean, I look young now. When I was 14, I looked 6. I mean, it was bad. I was short. I was like 5'2" or something. I hadn't hit puberty at all. All my friends were like, I remember Kiki, he got all these muscles, like out of nowhere. Just hit puberty. Dude's like jacked. And again, jacked is relative. But when I got to high school, there was, you'll know who I'm talking about because you went to my high school, but there was some guys in our high school that looked like 30-year-old men.
I remember when I played freshman football, they were grown-ass men.
Yeah.
Like going to the military, and it was like, yeah, no, you definitely are a grown-ass man. I feel like you're ready to go now. You could do it right now. Yeah. I think for me, it was probably after high school.
Oh, really?
Because everybody went away to college, and I was pumping gas. I was super. Yeah. So
what was the age?
Insignificant. I don't know, 17? 18,
okay.
17?
Well, we graduate when we're 18. Or you were 17 when we graduated. So yeah, so 17, 18.
Probably 17.
So for me, it was 14. So let's picture those most insecure. That was when we were the most insecure internally, right? And externally, we tried really hard not to. No one know. Like, I was this red-faced little nerd trying to get straight A's and getting pity dances from my sister's friends because I felt so insignificant. And that's ultimately what it is too, is when you're really insecure, but you pretend you're not. I think that's dangerous.
It is very dangerous.
Yeah. Can we go into why? Like, why is that so dangerous?
Because it's false. It's like acting rich and not having any money. It's like acting successful and not having any, because it's not real. And if anybody takes your lead on that.
It's misleading, yeah.
It's very misleading. It's very misleading. And if anything, I think more success is going to make life harder. It's going to, regardless, but internally. If you're super insecure and nobody thinks you are, you're missing out on so many opportunities to connect with people that you would connect with.
Yeah, and to learn. Because if you're portraying, we talked about this a little bit in the last episode, if you're trying to portray being competent or confident or greatness, for whatever that means, you kind of aren't in a position to actually learn. Yeah. You're sort of, it's like you at the fire academy, you didn't want to look dumb, so you didn't ask questions, and then you ended up dumb because of it. It's not dumb, but you know what I'm saying. You ended up losing in the long run. Everything that's good for you in the short term is pretty much bad for you long term. It's so weird.
It is weird.
I'm actually grateful that I started playing the long game when I was 14. I decided, because I saw, just think of who I'm thinking of, because we'll just keep it anonymous, but I was in Spanish class, and he was dating the most attractive girl in our high school, and the dude was a grown man.
Okay.
Yeah, and I remember being in Spanish class, and we had a fairly attractive Spanish teacher, and when you're a young boy, all you care about is like,
what was your name? What was your Spanish name? Do you remember? Mine was Gilberto.
I don't know if I had one, man. I don't know. That was a dark time for me.
In retrospect, it's like how strange you have to choose a Spanish name.
Yeah.
Why can't I just be? I don't want to take somebody else's name because I'm in a class that's Spanish. I feel like that's kind of weird now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's been a trip to look back. And so picture that class, and I remember thinking to myself, I'm screwed. I'm so screwed. I can't compete with this guy. And just a few years earlier, she was my girlfriend. In middle school, I was blonde hair, Backstreet Boy. No one hit puberty yet, so it was that. And when I was high school, I'm in trouble. I'm in some trouble here. So I just decided to be the smartest person ever. And I just decided to play the long game. I remember making that choice. I remember thinking, I can't win this game of whatever the hell this is in even the next 5 years. I'm
masculinity.
Screwed.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
It was external masculinity.
Yeah, external masculinity.
And I knew I wasn't going to win that either.
Yeah, I cannot win. So I'm just going to play the longest game ever. And I didn't realize, but when the past is painful and the present is painful, you kind of have to do that. You just go into the future. And I think that's where, ever since I was a kid, I think my visionary whateverness, my future orientation came from, well, the past is painful and the present is painful, so I better look into the future. And I'm sure part of that was visionary and part of that was just to escape.
Have you ever seen? You don't watch anything, so I don't know any movies that he's been in that you would. Did you ever? You didn't never watch The Walking Dead, I'm guessing.
I did. Yeah, I did.
You know John Bernthal? I don't know what character he is. I think he's the sheriff in that. No, he's not the sheriff.
You know, is it the?
He's the Punisher. In the Punisher series. Hold on, let me show you. We're only gonna do. Alan and I we're planning on doing 2 episodes. We're gonna do 1.
Yeah.
So it's gonna be. We'll make it a little bit longer.
I know who you're talking about. Right?
Certain?
He has like a wider nose. He's like.
That's what you asked me. He has a wider nose.
He's got a very unique nose. He's got a unique big set of ears on him. I think I know who you're talking about.
Well,
I'm not trying to hate on the guy.
No. No, he's a good looking dude. He's a stud.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a man crush on him straight up. Keep it real. What is this? Stay in Safari. I don't know. Just let me show a picture of him.
Yeah. Yep.
That's him?
Yeah. He's in the first 2 seasons.
Okay.
Yeah. Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. 2 seasons. He just didn't show up for the 3rd one. I'm not saying he died or anything.
No idea why. I'm not saying he did or didn't die, but
I have been consuming a lot of his he has a podcast called Real Ones, and he sits down with people and just has real deep conversations and talks.
Yeah.
I don't know him. I'm not saying I associate with him. I'm not saying he's a role model, but I get really good vibes from him because he's very externally masculine, but he is super vulnerable. And he just seems, he had somebody on the show recently that was on Daredevil, and he was in Daredevil as the Punisher. The Punisher is my favorite thing of all time. That's why I'm talking about it so much. And when he had her on, it was just like he just gave her the floor and gave her all the love in the beginning and was super supportive when she was crying. And it's just like that, to me, is the best representation externally from the outside. I don't know him personally. I would love to. If I could get to know John Bernthal.
You will.
My life.
I think you will if you want to.
I do want to.
He has a podcast, and you're the podcast guy. We'll make it happen. But
I just want to meet him for anything, just to talk to him, to see. I think there's a piece of me that wants to see behind the scenes.
Yeah, see if he really is.
Are you what I think you are?
I think Emilia and I were talking about that on our walk yesterday. One of the downsides of virtual is when you meet people in person, it is a different energy. Yeah. There's a delta. It's almost like this is the 2D world. Sure. I think in person it's just different energetically. That's a whole nother episode maybe. But there's a downside to that. I remember whenever I meet someone in person, there's a delta, either positive or negative. People are either more than I thought or less than I thought. And again, I don't mean intrinsically. I love human beings in general. But it's even physically. The way people look online when you meet them in person, oh my goodness, this is very different. Sometimes it's way better. Sometimes it's way worse. Again, it is what it is.
Yeah. I mean, if you were to look at us, you would think Alan and I are the same size. If you look at this, I am taller than Alan in my frame. I am not taller than Alan in real life. You'd be.
I gotta put on my little booster seat.
Yeah, you probably should. If it was like to scale, I'd be like way down. I wouldn't even be able to be on the mic. I'd be talking up to the mic like this. But luckily, I can set my camera up however I want.
NLU listener, what is happening? I just wanted to jump in here and let you know if you want to get to the next level faster, we have a free virtual monthly meetup at the first Thursday of every month, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You can connect with like-minded people and become a bigger part of this amazing global community. The link to register will be in the show notes. So where was I? What did I want? Oh, okay. What's the opposite of that? Whatever that was in the way he treated her and was there for her, safe space, vulnerable. Like, what's the opposite? Like, what would be considered toxic?
Somebody said this to me on a podcast recently. They said, all I think that toxic is just wildly immature. I was like, interesting.
What does immature mean? Because I agree. I mean, I definitely, you can tell.
Your character is below your age and life experience.
I think it all comes down to being fake. I think ego is just being fake.
Yeah.
You're trying to portray something that isn't real. You're trying to portray strength that isn't real. The pufferfish and the turtle shell. The pufferfish is actually scared because it knows it's weak, so it has to puff up to pretend that it's strong in order to protect itself. I think that's a really good metaphor for what toxic masculinity is.
Quite literally. That is its defense mechanism. That's how it stays alive.
Yeah, and I think that that's what happens. And I think a lot of men who are... What I've found in my coaching is men who have fathers who are really toxic tend to go one of two ways. They either go the opposite direction, they end up the turtle, which is what I did, for sure. Or... And in some ways, I became the puffer too, publicly. I understand that I would puff up at certain times for sure. So I'm not perfect in this by any means. I think the amount that we puff and the amount that we turtle is just lower. Everyone's still doing it. Right now, if you triggered me, I would either have to turtle shell or puff up. But I just wouldn't do it as much. I'm not going to go from 5 to 10 and suddenly be like, oh, well, Kev, did you know that I know that, right? I'm not going to, it might be, well... What do you think about that, son? Like, playfully, right? I think that it shows being a real man, quote unquote, in this episode. Another thing that shows and indicates a quote unquote real man is someone who can play with their ego playfully. It's like you and I will flex and playfully, and a lot of people think it's toxic, by the way, FYI.
Yeah, and understandable.
Understandable, yeah. And I think it is for a lot of people who do flex. You and I are doing it in a way where we're playing with our ego. We're not actually like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I've been in rooms, and I'll keep this anonymous, but I've been in rooms with people who flex with us, and I know that that's actually what they're like. So it's not as enjoyable for me. It's almost like, I don't know if we should. And what does that mean? But that's what they're like. It's almost like they're trying to portray something that deep down is not in alignment with how they really feel about themselves. It's almost like... What's a good example of this? It's like having a company that doesn't make any money and pretending... What's the name of the company that was raised $1 billion or whatever? The woman who was... Steve Jobs was her hero or whatever?
Hold on. Elizabeth something. I do not remember the name of the company, but it was all a fraud.
It was all a fraud. Yeah. That is a good metaphor, I think, for what the opposite of a real man is. I think a real man owns what's real. Like if I'm feeling strong and I'm feeling capable and competent and confident and I embody that, that's great. If I'm feeling really weak and insecure and hurt and sad and I'm trying to portray the opposite, I think that actually proves that I'm actually insecure about being who I really am.
It's I can't remember the actress's name who played her in the movie. I can't remember anything.
It's okay.
It was a company, and they raised like billions of dollars potentially, and then they found out like, oh, this is all fake. None of this is actually real. We don't have any answers to anything we've said. Wild.
It's almost like the less you are. We'll go quick with this, but there's two types of courage. There's two types of confidence. There's competence courage, and there's competence confidence. So we'll use Kevin and I as examples. I had a lot of competence courage and a lot of competence confidence. Makes sense. Meaning I felt like I could achieve externally what I wanted for the most part. But I didn't have a lot of courage in speaking up for who I am socially, and I didn't have a lot of confidence in who I am as a person. I would kind of hide my engineer, I would hide some of my genius stuff, and I would hide a lot of my intellect to try to fit in. I think that's why I drank so much too, because it made me feel relatable. Kev was the opposite. I feel like you were confident in who you were as a person, and you were courageous with who you were as a person, which is why you had no problem going to therapy and stuff like that. I don't want to say no problem, but less than me. And so you and I kind of drove to 5, and now I feel like we're both becoming confident not only in achievement, but also in who we are as men. And I think that when you're actually confident in who you are as a person and your abilities, I think that's when you actually have the opportunity to be, quote unquote, a real man, because then you don't have to constantly dance around your insecurities.
Yeah. I think that's what it is. It's just making your internal and external world elevate not at the same time necessarily, but you don't. Honestly, I would say it's more the internal world than the external. I think it went the opposite way for a long time, where it was, okay, you achieve success and you make money and you support the family and you provide for the family, blah, 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 blah. And just don't worry about your feelings. Don't even worry about them. Don't talk about them. Don't think about them. Don't you dare cry. How dare you cry? So I think it's the internal stuff. If you want to provide, I want to provide for my family. I don't think that makes me a man, though. If my wife said, hey, I would like to always make half of our money, cool, awesome.
That's
I don't have to.
W. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I don't have to prove to myself that, to me, that's not what makes you a man. That doesn't
But
make
on the
you a
other
man.
end, if, hey, I would like to not have to work one day, you also can step up to that plate too. And I think
For
that's
sure.
part of being a man as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's about knowing you, and it's about working on you internally and externally. It's about becoming the best version of you. If you're doing that, I would say you're becoming more and more of a man.
Agreed.
That's the best advice, or the best answer I can give. That's not even advice. The best answer I can give.
I have no clue what our time limit is, by the way. So okay,
I'm on it.
We're good. We're good.
Yeah, I'm on it.
Kevin and I, for a long time, we've talked about trying to be the male role models we never had. And I think we're sort of on that path. I think it's really cool. But this episode, I think, is really in alignment with that, because I've contemplated a lot of this but never talked about it really.
It's scary to talk about.
Yeah.
It's scary to talk about.
I remember my mom saying my stepdad was around from 3 to 14. That's 11 years. So he was around for 11 years. And my mom said she only ever saw him cry once. And it was at his mom's funeral. So my Grandma Joan, what I used to call my Grandma Joan. I never got to see her after 14, but when she passed away, my mom was there at the funeral, and she saw my stepfather cry for the first time. I remember thinking to myself, that's not great. It's not good. And there's other people in my life, I'll keep it anonymous because, again, a lot of this stuff is so delicate because of these insecurities. But I have someone in my life who's never seen their father cry, except for one time at his father's funeral. And I remember watching The Rock. The Rock posted a video, and I use The Rock. Please don't associate me with anyone, ever. It's not that I don't like The Rock. I think overall, whatever, but I just can't anymore. But anyway, so The Rock was a childhood hero of mine. He's no longer a hero of mine, and I'm just going to leave that there. But I remember watching the video of him at his father's funeral. Did you see that video? He posted one on Instagram.
I unfollowed.
It's on Instagram. I did too. Yeah, I unfollowed him too. Which is also interesting, right? We both did that. I don't even know if we talked about it.
We didn't. No, we definitely didn't.
Yeah, I unfollowed him as well. So I have no idea what's going on.
I've gone on a binge though. Like, I'm unfollowing so many people.
Same.
It's just like, I don't know why I followed you and why I want to follow you now are just different. So
agreed. So anyways, but back before I unfollowed him, and we're not suggesting to do that, by the way. I genuinely don't.
I'm not trying to sound pretentious.
Yeah, same.
It's
same.
Just like I used to
Personal
follow a lot of
choice.
supermodels.
Yeah.
Why was I following supermodels? I wonder.
My Instagram account I started in the fitness space. So it was just all that. So I've had to do a lot of unfollowing.
Yeah.
But anyways, so he posted a video of his speech at his father's funeral. And his father was in the wrestling industry and a public figure, and so was he. And I remember during the speech, he did not cry. He did everything he could to not cry. And he just sat there for a long period of time. And he said, just give me a minute. And the audience was respectful. And he just would not cry. And I remember thinking to myself, why not? Like, it's your father's funeral. You can cry, brother. Mm. What is that about? I mean, honestly, whatever that is, I don't have that.
Well, I think it depends. Maybe he's an ugly crier, and the second he starts crying, he loses control completely, and then he can't finish it. I think there's stuff under it, potentially.
When I was at my Uncle Joe's funeral, this might as well have been my dad's 2.0 funeral, because it was in the same church, it was in the same town, and for me, this was a really transformative day. And I've never talked about it publicly, or at least not to the extent I'm about to. But my Uncle Joe, so it was Jim, Joe, John, Jane, Joan, Jeanette, and it was 6 kids, Irish Catholic family. And my Uncle Joe, when my father passed away, struggled with that a lot because he was his best friend, right? So 30 years later, it's my Uncle Joe's funeral. My aunt, who lost 2 of her brothers, had to give a speech. And this is Emilia's sort of first or second or third interaction with my birth father's side of the family, and we're there, and I'm sitting there going, I remember this church. I remember ringing the bell, and I thought it was like this big, huge rope, and you jump up and you ring the bell, and I'm like, this is just this tiny little bell now. So it was just weird. And I'm also not religious, so just going back to old world and seeing what that whole thing was really powerful for me. And so anyways, I remember sitting there, and I remember thinking to myself, everyone here is trying to keep it together. I'm watching everyone trying to keep it together. They're trying not to break down. And I had this moment, and maybe this lands, maybe it doesn't, and I'm not trying to say anything negative about my family. I remember thinking, why are we trying to keep it together? I was crying. This might as well be my father's funeral that I never really got to attend as an adult. Mm. This is my father's funeral 2.0, and now I get to experience it. And we went to the same cemetery where my father's buried. And I got to go see him, and my whole family was there. And I'm sitting there, why am I the only one bawling my eyes out? Everyone else is trying not to cry. They actually said it. They said, like, I'm trying not to lose it. I'm trying not to lose it. Why? Let it out. And I had this moment, and this is my goddamn truth, so please, no one attack me for this. I remember thinking to myself, I am the one who's bawling. And I'm crying, and I'm feeling it all. And I'm the one who's the most a mess, quote unquote, in this moment, but I'm the least burdened. Mm. I looked around and I was like, I am the least burdened. And I know why, because I worked through so much of that. In therapy, in personal development, in you and I's crying, you and I Father's Day together, for years and years and years and years, I've faced so much of my past. And I've felt the feelings. The Body Keeps the Score is a book that talks about how your body is holding on to trauma. And I know I've released so much of that trauma. And I know that so many of the other people in my family have not. And I could feel it. And I said, I am the most messy right now. I'm ugly crying, but I am the least internally burdened. And if anyone out there is listening, I have to have the courage to say this. If you are deeply burdened, you're going to have to do breath work and therapy. And I had convulsive cries sometimes after certain movies from my traumas. You got to cry it out. It's so healthy to cry it out. You got to get it out because it's in there and it's holding you back.
I haven't cried in a minute. Been a minute since I've cried.
I feel like you had a doozy a couple weeks ago.
No, I don't think it was a doozy. I think that was a little one. I mean, I cried, but I haven't had like a...
For a man, I think that was a pretty hefty one.
Well, I'm grateful. I'm grateful.
A quote unquote. I'll put man in quotes. For a man, that was a hell of a cry, Kev.
It was okay.
You baby.
It was okay. Well, but I think that's an important piece is the more you surround yourself with people who are working through their own trauma, the safer you're going to be to actually be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I've only seen my mom cry once in my life. One time. My entire life. And it was recent, when we thought my grandmother was going to die. That was the first time I ever saw my mom cry. And you want to talk about a paradigm shift. I was like, whoa, what does all this mean? And it was really one of the first times I've ever seen my mom be vulnerable. I was holding my mom as she was crying in the hospital. I've never done that before. That's never happened. So that, if anything, for me was like, that made me step up more as what felt like a man.
Mm-hmm. Now,
did I hide my emotions? No. I was still emotional, and I was emotional with Taryn, and I was like, I don't know what any of this means. You're going to talk about identity crisis. I don't know what any of this means. So that felt like anytime somebody is like really, really, really struggling, like losing somebody close to them, those are always moments for me where it's like, just be the best man you can be and support them. Regardless of how uncomfortable it is, regardless of how scary it is, regardless of the uncertainty. That's always been a thing for me. I don't know why. I don't know what the definition of that is and what it all means, and I know we got to hop in a minute, so maybe we can't go deep on that, but I think that's what it is. I think it's overcoming your traumas and overcoming your triggers and it might as well be, what does it mean to be a empowered human?
Mm.
One of our clients that I consult with has a program all about being an empowered human. And that's kind of what it is. It's not, I don't think it's anything more than that. It's working on your stuff so you can just be better. Not necessarily accomplish more, but so you can be more well-rounded, so you don't pass on stuff, so you take ownership, so you live in the truth more. You live in the truth, not from a place of ego, but from a place of truth. I think there's a difference between somebody having ego and telling Alan a truth that doesn't need to be told. That's ego. Versus having the courage to tell Alan a truth that you know he needs to know and doing it in a vulnerable, scared way. I think that's what I'm aspiring to, at least.
Same. I know we got to jump. I watched a movie with Emilia last night. We often frequent childhood gems. There's a movie based apparently on an autobiography I've never read. I didn't read books back then. Fly Away Home.
That the geese movie?
Yeah. It's very cute. Taryn would love that movie.
I'm sure she's seen it back in the day. I think I probably saw it back in the day too.
And it's a very wholesome movie. And that's what we said last night. We were watching it, and it was a very wholesome movie. And I like that word a lot. And I turned to her and I said, wholesome. I said, I'm really grateful we have such a wholesome relationship. In the past, there was, I went to college and, you're dating girls. Well, we weren't official. And so you're talking to, it was just not that wholesome. It was very,
a good way to put it.
It was a mess, right? And I have a very wholesome relationship now. I turned to her, I said, I'm really grateful we have such a wholesome relationship. We don't lie to each other about anything. No one's talking to anyone else. I don't have anything to worry about. I remember in the past, it was so brutal. Particularly if you're trying to date really attractive people. It's just this whole damn thing, right? Because everyone's after them, kind of.
We have 2 minutes.
Friends.
We have 2 minutes. What's going on with Fly Away Home?
Yeah. The point is, I think that what it means to be a real man is to be wholesome.
Respect that.
Holistic, wholesome, virtuous. And I think that if you can honestly say that you're working on that, you're ahead of the game. That's really important.
You ever seen Page Master?
No.
Childhood gem.
No details or?
Nope. None needed.
Let me look it up.
Yes. See? Page Master. I think Macaulay Culkin's in it. Younger. Nah. Maybe it's not Macaulay Culkin.
It is. No, it is. I'm looking at the.
You want to talk about a why? And again, I haven't. What year did this come out? I haven't watched it since then. But
I'm on it.
We're gonna call Alan the Google machine.
It's not Google. I'm IMDb.
IMDb. International
Page.
Movie Database. Is that what that is?
Yes.
Wow.
I remember back in the day when this was a brand new website, and
what do we got for details over there?
Hold on, it's not coming up.
I think Doc Martin from Back to the Future's in it also. I don't know his name.
It's not a famous movie. So this is also my screen is.
It's
The Page Master. And it's a cartoon? Is it a cartoon?
No, I think there's cartoon pieces in it.
Yeah.
It was ahead of its time, I'm telling you right now.
1994.
That's when I remember I had the VHS, and it came in the thicker container. So it wasn't just a sleeve. It wasn't a cardboard sleeve. It was a plastic container that opened. Oh,
Nice.
It was purple, I think.
6.1
I don't know
on IMDb. Did not do well, sir.
It was ahead of its time. The
Okay.
awareness of I mean, come on, the human awareness wasn't there yet. That's what I'm saying. All right, we got to bounce because Alan has a coaching call, and I have to pack because I am leaving early tomorrow for PodFest 2024.
Good luck, brother.
I appreciate it very much. As always, we love you. We appreciate you. Grateful for each and every one of you. I just want to say this too. I appreciate the opportunity for Alan and I to talk about deep stuff like this. The only time we ever get negative stuff is like on social media from people that don't know us. But I very much appreciate this community because even having this conversation I was like, this is kind of out there, and it's very vulnerable to have these types of conversations. So again, I appreciate the community so very much. As always, at NLU, we do not have fans. We have family. We will talk to you all tomorrow.
Talk to you soon.